Good evening, everybody. There have been a lot of lingering effects from the pandemic, and in some cases, we're still trying to get a full grasp of the scope of the problem with something called learning loss, the disrupted education of a generation of kids who had to learn virtually when their school buildings were forced to close. Well, that was the focus of a hearing today at the state capitol. Members of the Assembly Education Committee heard from the Board of Regents, a teachers union, the Council of Superintendents, and others discussing the challenges that schools are facing now that things have mostly returned to normal. A big focus is on getting students caught back up to their learning level. They also dealt with issues like staffing for support services that are crucial to students' overall well-being.
Thanks to infusions of federal funds and state foundation aid dollars, while most districts have the financial resources available for learning recovery, districts are facing staffing issues for these needed learning recovery programs.
There is a lot to this, and joining us live now is Assemblyman Bill Conrad, a Democrat who represents the Tonawandas and parts of Buffalo, serves on the Education Committee. Sir, I think you're the only Western New Yorker on the committee, so it's a great pleasure to have you on the show tonight to talk about this. I mean, they had this hearing before the committee today. I wonder what you at this point would say is the biggest issues that our schools are facing when it comes to this term that we've all learned, learning loss.
Well, I think it's no secret, being an educator myself and parenting and teaching through this whole entire pandemic. The big topic is, of course, how can we make up the student learning loss? And, a big part of what we're trying to do is understand the learning loss, what the kids and the teachers and the parents went through. And of course, what we know is it's going to take time. It's going to take resources. We need to give some folks a break, but at the same time, we got to be able to get them back up to speed, and that's going to take some time.
There are multiple studies now that are out that show very clearly that learning loss hits certain populations the hardest. Poorer students, minority students, those in special education programs. In some cases, did the pandemic end up sort of exposing these bigger problems that already existed prior to the pandemic, but now we can even see them clearer?
The inequalities were there in the system. It just, as you said, it showed the struggling to struggle more. You talk about, the inequalities in our system, whether it's broadband access to equipment. It was a handful of things, and I have to give a lot of credit to schools because they scrambled to make things happen. We saw schools put, internet on bus in rural communities to make sure that they had hotspots. School districts provided food to a lot of families. It was quite an experience among teachers and parents joining forces like never before. But as I think we take away from this, nothing replaces the brick and mortar schools that are in our community. And I'm hearing a lot from teachers. My own wife's a teacher, and again, we need to get back to the standard of what is acceptable in the classroom in terms of behavior, but also the workload that has it. And we need to make sure that we deal with the loss of maturity, the loss of executive function, the grief and trauma that these students went through, and mental health needs to be kind of a paramount issue right now. And you touched on a big point, that is that we just don't have enough staff right now. There's not enough folks in the schools taking these classes and looking at this as an opportunity.
Yeah, and it was interesting today to hear the representative who was there from the State Education Department answering questions from your committee chairman about the funding of that, because it's not so much that they don't have the money, because they got, billions of dollars from the federal government in COVID relief. So the money is there to pay for these staff members to support these services, but you can't find the people to fill those positions. I know that the term solution kept getting thrown around during this hearing today. You don't just want to just talk about the problem, right? You want to search for solutions. What do you think some of those solutions are after hearing from all these people?
Well, something that I genuinely support is taking a look at teacher movement, looking at incentives to actually get people into the classroom, whether it's an aide position. Bus drivers is a big topic across the state, but also just trying to get the folks to look at teaching and offer incentives to make that a little bit more plausible. When I applied for my first teaching job, there were 700 applicants. When I left, there were 5. That's a big crisis that's affecting right now, I think, our private schools and our charter schools, and it's making its way into our public schools, which tend to be more sought after in terms of pay and so on. So we have to make sure that we're looking at what can we do to incentivize. But this is workforce development that's across the spectrum. This isn't just teaching, it's nursing, it's finding volunteer firefighters. It's something that's become a big problem in our area.
I'm almost out of time, but there was obviously this heated debate during the pandemic about closing schools to begin with. As we look back now, do you think we learned lessons about that? God forbid something like this happen again during our lifetimes or even later on.
Like I said, I think there's no replacement for brick and mortar schools. And I think we've got a lot of things to look at if we ever return into another pandemic situation, God willing, never again. But I think we have to take a good look at what exactly happened and how can we avoid that in the future. Like I said, there's nothing that will replace a brick and mortar school.
Assemblyman Bill Conrad, a member of the Assembly Education Committee, which had this hearing earlier today. Thanks so much for joining us. Good to get your insight on this.
Thank you.